best workouts you can do if you're targeting a half marathon race. That's what I'm covering off today, 7 of the best half marathon workouts out there to get you race ready. If you are training for a half marathon PB, you absolutely 100% cannot reach your potential unless you are training this system specifically. And I'm going to give you a beginner adapted version of each workout so that you can try them out if you're new to intervals or threshold style work.
Yes! Hell yeah!
And if you make it to the end, I'm going to provide you with a formula that you can use based on your target time that gives you a race pace strategy so that you can hit that target time. Disclaimer, it goes without saying that these sessions should be done after a thorough warm-up and should be followed by a thorough cool-down. Please don't get injured. These sessions are all tried and tested by myself, and I'm currently in a half marathon training block, feeling pretty damn fast and strong if I do say so. Look at me piling the pressure on myself for that half marathon I'm racing next weekend. And let's not just take my word for it. Try these out and let me know what you think. Right, this first one is one of my favorite sessions. It's a killer. I wholly underestimated it when I first did it, but if you can hit this session, you're fit. It's 5 by a mile at threshold off half a mile float. Now, if you're not sure what threshold really means, it's a pace that is at or just below your body's lactate threshold. You can find that out by getting this tested, as I recently did in a lab, or you can use an online calculator like this one, which I will link below. Why do we run at threshold? Because training at this pace helps train your body to become more efficient at clearing the lactate buildup at this pace. That's the nasty stuff that makes you want to slow down towards the end of a 10K race. And so by getting better at clearing lactate, you can gradually push that pace forward so that your lactate threshold is a new, shinier, faster pace. And this is really important because if you are training for a half marathon PB, you absolutely 100% cannot reach your potential unless you are training this system specifically. Because your lactate threshold is what limits you. It limits your performance at this distance. Improve it and you've taken time off your half marathon projection. That's pretty much half marathon training in a nutshell, so I'll just be leaving now then. Just kidding, there's still 6 more sessions to give you, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. Okay, so I sidetracked a little bit there in my quest to tell you about lactate threshold. So you run your 5 by a mile at threshold, then float for half a mile. Not a recovery jog, it's at a steady run pace. That's faster than your easy runs, but slower than marathon pace. For me, I'll do the reps at around 5:25 to 5:30 minute miling, and my float is about 1 minute slower than that at around 6:30 pace. And hopefully, minutes per kilometer have magically appeared on the screen thanks to my fantastic editor. And for the beginner version of that one, if you're new to interval or threshold type workouts, start off with just 2 times 1 mile with the half mile flow and try to add 1 extra rep every 3 weeks to build up to that full terrifying 5. Session number 2 is a good old track sandwich. Personally, I would run this one on the track, but you could run it on the road or on some nice manicured grass if you can either measure out the reps or rely on your GPS. It goes like this. 5 times 800 meters of 200 meter easy jog recovery, 800 jog after the set, and then into a 2-mile tempo, nice and controlled, 800 meters easy jog after that, and then finishing up with 5 times 300 meters of 100 meters easy jog recovery.
What pace am I meant to run these?
Don't tell me you want to know what pace to be running for those. Am I right?
Yes.
So the 800s I would pitch at around 10k pace. That could be your 10k goal race pace, your PB, or a recent 10k race time. They're intervals, and I like to encourage my athletes to build into their intervals. That's not getting faster towards the end of each rep, it's making each rep incrementally faster than the last. It's not easy, but it's really good training to get you used to pacing yourself at the start of a race or a session and picking it up towards the end. The 2-mile tempo is at your tempo pace.
What does tempo mean?
So tempo is actually different to threshold. Sometimes people use those terms interchangeably, but they're wrong. To be fair, I even mix these up sometimes. Tempo pace is run slightly slower than your lactate threshold level. For me, I run my tempos at 15 to 20 seconds slower per mile than my threshold pace, and it's typically run in longer chunks. You'll hear people talk about a 30-minute or a 4-mile tempo, for example. The idea is to get your body used to running comfortably at a slightly uncomfortable pace for a long time. A real hallmark of marathon training for a lot of people, but also very useful here. In this instance, the 2-mile tempo breaks up some faster end work, hence the sandwich, and the tempo is the juicy, tasty bit inside of the bread of those speedier reps in this instance. Then those 300s, they're at or slightly below 5k race pace, finishing with the need for speed because improving your top end speed has a real trickle-down effect on your half marathon pace too. You need speed work to improve at any distance. And before I move on to the third session, a beginner's cut down version of this one would be 2 times 800, 2-mile tempo, 2 times 200. And you could walk the recoveries instead of jogging as well. Session number 3 is one you're gonna love if your watch is set to kilometers. Yes, if you love the beep of your watch being more frequent than us mile measurers, this session is in Ks, and it's alternating pace kilometers. Now, you could also do this in miles, but it's one that I learned in Ks, so I'm gonna honor that, even though I will die as a mile measuring runner. Anyway, this one is a sort of hybrid between a run and a session. Not as intense as the last two, but still a good bang for your buck workout, and maybe a good one to use on a down week, the first week of training in a long block, or in the taper. It's a little kinder than some of the harder ones. After your warm up, you start this run taking the odd kilometers steady and the even kilometers at tempo pace, not threshold. This is different to the 5 by a mile threshold, half a mile steady, similar in that we're alternating paces, but it's easier because the ons are at tempo, not threshold, and the offs, or floats, so to speak, are the same distance, 1 kilometer, so you effectively get extra recovery. Continue alternating pace every kilometer for 10k, and then just cool down. It's a short and sweet one. You're focusing on tuning into those different paces and working on that aerobic base, and you could do longer than 10k if you wanted to. And this is a really nice one actually to ease into these types of sessions with, perhaps starting with just 6k if you're a complete newbie to workouts. Session 4 is a classic. And if the last session was for our metric people, this one is for our old school miles fans. It's mile repeats, 6 of them. This is a speed endurance session, so we're looking for faster than half marathon pace, about halfway between your 10k race pace and half marathon race pace, and there's only 75 seconds of recovery. That's hard, which is why you need to be really disciplined with these and not overrun them. So go out of your 10k race pace or faster, and this one is gonna really burn. You can adapt this one to 8 by a mile if you want a bigger workout, but I'd suggest dialing the pace backwards if you do that towards your half marathon race pace. And the beginner entry to this one would be 3 by a mile. And it's a great one to do midway into your block or a month or so before your race to check where you're at and get those consistent miles ticked off. Session numero 5, the progression run. I like to do this one as a long run between 10 to 14 miles or 16 to 22 kilometers. Now you take the first 3 to 4 miles easy, then easing down to a steady pace for the next 2 to 3 miles, easing down further to a high steady pace for 2 to 3 miles, and high steady is, I'd say, the top end of your steady running before you creep into marathon pace, and then working down for the last 2 to 3 miles at half marathon race pace. I don't want to put specific hard, rigid timestamps on this one because that's not the idea. You don't hit 3 miles in and immediately run a new pace. It's like a massage. It's all about easing into those paces and gradually winding it up. And again, you can use a pace calculator to help you get a better idea of what those pace ranges should be at each step of the progression, but really I'd say feel it out. The first 3 miles should feel easy. And then from there until the last 3 miles, you're working down very gradually to finish at your half marathon pace. It's a great way to combine the long run and a workout and to get some half marathon race pace work in on pretty tired legs. Number 6 is 3 miles, 2 miles, 2 miles, all run at goal half marathon pace. You get 3 minutes of easy jogging recovery after the 3 miles and 2 minutes between the 2 miles. Simple pimple, a great road session, and try to do this one on a section of road that's similar to the one you'll race on. Most of the time, you can look up the race you're going to do, see the course online. Is it flat? Is it hilly? Does it include some gravel sections? Do this session in a similar environment, navigating those race day characteristics. Kind of a dress rehearsal for hitting that goal race pace. Cut it down to just 2 miles and 2 by 1 mile if you're just moving up from the 10K and you're still new to workouts, and the full session is one you're going to want to be able to gradually work up to after a few weeks. It's a great one to be able to tick off before you race your first half marathon because it's a toughie. And I've just about run out of colours because I don't like yellow. But finally, I do love a good ladder workout. This one adds a little more pace variety into the mix. A little like the track workout I described earlier. You can do this one on the track again or on the road or some nicely tamed grass. The ladder goes 400, 800, 1K, 2K, 1K, 800, 400. It's 6.4K and you get some nice jog recoveries with this one. 400 jog after the 400s and 800 jog after everything else. That's lovely recovery. That does mean that this ends up being quite a big volume session, but with a decent chunk of it done at your jog recovery pace. And the idea with this one is to move through the gears. The shorter the reps, the faster the pace. So the 400s should be done at roughly your 1 mile race pace. And if you don't have one, that's fine. Just go faster than your 5K race pace. Then the 800s, a little slower than that. The 1K, again a little slower, perhaps similar to your 10K race pace or a little faster, and so on. The 2K should still be faster than your half marathon race pace, roughly your 10K race pace or slightly off, and then you get to come back down the ladder, moving back through those faster gears. This is a real tough one, but it will work on your raw speed, your turnover, and will help train your pacing brain too. Now for that race day pacing strategy tool I mentioned earlier. So for this example, let's say you're shooting for a 1 hour 45 minute goal time. That works out at an average pace of 8:01 minute miling or 4:59 minutes per K. For the first 3 miles or the first 5K, you cannot go faster than 5 seconds per mile or 2 seconds per K slower than that average. And you want to sit in these windows, which are 5 to 8 seconds per mile or 2 to 4 seconds per K slower. Because if you go off a little slower, you're way more likely to have more to give in those closing stages than if you go off too fast. And going off too hard is the most common mistake people make. Then after that, for the rest of the race or most of it, you're aiming to hit that average pace we're looking for. If there's an uphill, you might run 5 seconds slower. If there's a downhill, you'll recoup that. Hone in to that rhythm of that average pace. Then for the last mile or K&a-half, run as fast as you can. This is where you recoup the time added onto the first 3 miles. You can always dig just a little bit deeper when the end is in sight, so trust yourself and full send it. Please let me know if you try any of these out. I'd love to hear how you find them. And if you're looking for a little more speed, here's a video with some cracking 5K sessions you can try, including one where I rip apart the tempo run and put it back together with some speed bursts added in the middle. Good luck in your half marathons and love the grind.